The Wisbey Mystery is another hidden objects puzzle game, free from Prime Gaming if you got a Prime membership, via the Legacy Game Store until 30th of April 2025. I've said before that these games are a bit of a guilty pleasure for me. I know that corners are cut with all of these games, or the ones that I've played via Amazon, but I enjoy the logic puzzles and the hidden object parts, and I don't mind puzzling out where to use an item to progress the game forward. This one, on the other hand, lacks everything that makes the games enjoyable for me, and has none of the refinements that the genre has that I appreciate. There is such a lack of effort on show here that I was actually a bit annoyed by it, which is probably not what the developers were going for. The first missing refinement that I like is in the difficulty settings. In most of these games we're now offered easy, medium, hard and custom difficulties, which lets us specify exactly what we need help with, giving us a tailored experience. Here, it's easy or it's hard. That's your lot. It's not the biggest issue, obviously, but it is a sign of things to come. When I started the game up, I got another cutscene, and it felt like the voiceover is AI.
A few days have passed and he still hasn't returned, and I can't reach him at all. I have to ask you for assistance, as if the police is involved, he can lose his license. The manor is a private property, and no one's allowed to enter it.
It's probably not, because I think it might be a little bit too old for, like, a ChatGPT. It was made in 2017, but it's at least computer generated. What's weird is the text does come up on the screen as if an AI is writing it out though. And it sounds and looks pretty bad. Not a great start. The game itself is a standard chain of finding an item, using it with the correct interactable object on screen, which gives you another item, and so on and so forth. Objects are scattered throughout several static screens, which you need to navigate between. Wisbey scores a point here because it doesn't have illogical item use, which I hate in these games. Unfortunately, it loses that point because it introduces a new annoyance. At some points, it has multiple objects that require the same item at the same time. For example, at one point I think I had 2 or 3 objects that needed a handle, and they were set across different screens. When I did get a handle, it wasn't obvious what it fitted, so I had to try the handle on all of those objects. While it doesn't sound like the biggest deal, there is a bit of time spent moving between different screens, remembering where each object is, because it might have been a while since you actually found the object that needed a handle. None of the other games do this, because it's not necessary, is it? If you just have a little bit of imagination and put a little bit of effort in, it just doesn't have to be like this. That leads me into my second refinement that I tend to appreciate, which is not here, and that's restricting the number of screens that you need to navigate between. I prefer it when games chop up the narrative into sections, and each section has 4 or 5 screens, which cuts down on the amount of backtracking you need to do, because I don't find that fun in any way. Wisbey don't do that, and towards the end of the game this meant I had, I don't know, a dozen or more screens that are open to navigate between, and some just were done. There was nothing in there for me to use, but I still accidentally wandered into it at times. I mean, that's a skill issue for sure, which is why I like the sectioned off game approach, I guess, but again, it doesn't need to be a problem. This has been solved. There is actually so much backtracking in Wisbey that I was wondering if it was done to draw out the playing time, but this game was done and dusted within an hour and a half, so if that was the reason, it didn't work very well. This is a really short game. One of the reasons for how short it is my main complaint here. There are no real puzzles in this hidden objects puzzle game. There are hidden object puzzles, which I would probably call games instead. They're straightforward, they're a list of items to find, and the items are in the scene. there's none of the multi-stage elements you get in other games where you might have to assemble an item from a couple of different ones on the screen and then be able to click the item. There's none of that here. Unfortunately, they still didn't do this quite right. No one seems to have quality checked them. In one puzzle, there's the word leave, as in to bugger off somewhere else, when it actually meant leaf, like you get on a tree. There are a lot of spelling mistakes and nonsensical sentences in the game. I don't know if that's a translation thing, but I mean, the game's an hour and a half long. How long would it have taken someone at some level to have checked the English? Couple of hours? 3 hours? It wouldn't have been a lot. Anyway, back to my main complaint. There's no actual puzzles at all, which is a large part of the enjoyment that I get from these games, and I mean, it's in the description of the game. And so, it's a hidden objects game, not a hidden objects puzzle game as far as I'm concerned. Because there's so many things that show a lack of effort being put in, I'm just wondering whether putting puzzles in was just too much effort. That wouldn't surprise me, given all the other issues this game has. Weirdly, a bit more effort was put into the story, which is probably the least important aspect of these games. The story in these games is never that important, so it's weird to put that much effort in, and it's still not particularly interesting. I mean, that effort would have been better spent on puzzles or more imaginative items to use, instead of using a succession of handles, knives, keys and gems. Even making the scenes a bit more interesting would have helped, because we're presented with a succession of fairly boring muted rooms that are pretty similar to each other. It's just not a lot of variety in there, and it kind of feels boring. As I said before, the game is from 2017, so this might be one of the earlier entries in the genre, and that would explain why so many features that I enjoy are missing. But it doesn't justify the lack of puzzles or the mistakes in spelling that actually affect gameplay, like in the hidden object games. Overall, this is just a bad example of the genre that I really don't recommend anyone play, even the biggest fans. Please don't waste your time on this one, it's really not worth it. Okay, time for me to leave now. I'm off. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.